This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, the editor-in-chief at FanDuel and at NumberFire.com, and this is episode 211 of the Late Round Podcast, one of the many shows that are part of the NumberFire Podcast Network. Thanks for tuning in. Something happened in last week's Cowboys-Rams game that was absolutely normal in today's football world, but it shouldn't be. The score was 30-15, and the clock was approaching the 2-minute mark in the fourth quarter. The game was close to over. Dallas had the ball, and Dak Prescott ran it in for a touchdown, making it 30-21. So at that point in time, there was 2 minutes and 11 seconds left on the clock, and Dallas was down 9. So they lined up to kick the extra point because they wanted to keep it a one-score game. They wanted to be down 8. And that was the wrong choice. In today's NFL world, we've got a large group of people who push back on analytics. I've had to fight this fight in my little bubble for years. Part of the reason that I love fantasy football analysis is that I don't have to deal with that much. It's a numbers-driven game, so naturally you've got to use numbers in some way to draw conclusions. But when you've got talking heads who played football in the 1970s, you get pushback. When ex-players think about analytics, they think it's bad for computers to take over their game, even though that's not at all what analytics are doing. When something has been forced into your mind over and over and over again, it makes that something more difficult to become untrue. Because humans don't like being wrong about things, or they don't like admitting that something that was correct to them may not be so correct. That's just how we work. There was a Boston Globe article published in 2010 called How Facts Backfire, and the TLDR of the article can be summed up in one paragraph. It reads, "Facts don't necessarily have the power to change our minds. In fact, quite the opposite. In a series of studies in 2005 and 2006, researchers at the University of Michigan found that when misinformed people, particularly political partisans, were exposed to corrected facts in news stories, they rarely changed their minds. In fact, they often became even more strongly set in their beliefs. Facts, they found, were not curing misinformation. Like an unpowered antibiotic, facts could actually make misinformation even stronger." If you spend an hour on any social media site, you probably see how this would be the case. You can present straight up facts to a back and forth debate, and the other person arguing with you will only become more stuck in their ways. It only reinforces the other side's position. And we're all guilty of this. It's really hard not to be guilty of this. But when it comes to NFL analysis and facts that are being brought forth by numbers and logic and reasoning, we see this dissonance. I don't think numbers give you all of the answers in football, you guys. I think analyzing data properly can give you an edge and increase your probability to do things successfully, but no qualified analytics person is sitting there talking in absolutes. That's a big misconception that's out there, and it's another reason that we've seen so many vocal anti-analytics people. I just want to get that out there and clear the air. With the Cowboys last weekend, we're seeing a lot of this at play. As players and fans of the game of football, we've been taught that you should always try to keep games as one-possession games. So in the Cowboys case, it's 30-21, so kicking the extra point makes sense. You should keep the game as a one-possession game. But new information and logic and reasoning say otherwise. Really, the Cowboys should have gone for 2 after they scored that first touchdown. They should have tried to make it a 7-point game. If you know that you've got to score twice and get at least 1 2-point conversion to force overtime, you should do it sooner rather than later. Because if you do it sooner and you fail, you have time to make up for that mistake. If you wait until the end of the game and you fail, you lose the game. There's no time to try and get the ball back. That's the basic premise of all of this. This was something that I talked through on Twitter when Jason Garrett decided to kick the extra point. In Dallas's case, it probably wouldn't have mattered that much in the end because there wasn't a whole lot of time left on the clock. But to me, it's more about the critical thinking aspect. And it was something that a lot of people pushed back on when I was tweeting through it, so I figured I'd use today's episode to explain that in more detail. So let's go back to when the game was 30-21. You have a choice. You either kick an extra point or you go for 2. Keep in mind, the expected value these days on a 2-point try is no different than an extra point. Technically speaking, because kickers are missing extra points at a higher rate with the line of scrimmage change, teams should be going for 2 more often, especially if their kicker sucks. But you have 2 choices. With each choice, let's assume the outcome of the 2-point try is the same. In other words, your odds of converting that 2-point conversion is no different earlier in the game than later. And numbers do mostly back this up. We just have a sample size issue since not a lot of teams are ending games with 2-point tries to force overtime. Let's say you do what Dallas did and kick the extra point. Dallas decided to kick the ball off after that decision because they had timeouts to stop the clock, but let's just assume that Dallas got the ball back, whether an onside kick happened or they held the Rams to a 3-and-out. So Dallas is now down 8. They have the ball with maybe a minute 30 to 2 minutes remaining. They've got to go 60 to 80 yards and score a touchdown to bring the game within 2. In that scenario, it's really tough to envision a team playing super aggressively because they're actually thinking that they might fail the 2-point conversion if they score a touchdown. They more than likely want to be the last team with the football. That would make the 2-point try a make or break situation. If they convert, it forces overtime. But what's being ignored in all of this is if they don't convert. If Dallas drives down the field and scores a touchdown with 10 seconds left, what happens if they miss the 2-point conversion? The game is over. That seals it. Dallas loses. Now remember, the outcome of the 2-point try would be the same whether they attempted after the first touchdown or the second touchdown. So in an alternate universe, let's assume that they missed the 2-point try after they scored that first touchdown. In this particular game, it's probably not going to be easy to score 9 or more points with 2 minutes and 11 seconds to go. I get it. That's why I said this probably matters a lot less for Dallas in this particular case. But at least you have a chance to alter your decision making because you know the outcome of the 2-point conversion. When you wait, you don't have that information. So when you're down 9, if you're able to get the ball back, you can be more aggressive and leave time on the clock to attempt a field goal and potentially win the game. It's not a super likely thing to happen, but you're at least giving yourself a chance. And remember, in the former universe, you were driving down the field more than likely not wanting to give the ball back to the Rams. You don't want to give the ball back to the other team. You want to keep it. You were putting everything on that drive, and the 2-point conversion was going to either force overtime or not force overtime. But in this new universe, you already know that you failed on that 2-point try. So you're taking more chances and being more aggressive in order to give your team a chance to win. Because you know that you need 2 possessions, not just 1. That's the reasoning behind going for 2 early and not late. Now, like I said, there's been a lot of pushback with this. Aside from just not understanding the logic behind it, one of the responses that I was getting is the momentum argument. If you miss the 2-point conversion on the first try, then your defense is going to give up because they're down 9 and not 8. They know they're not likely to win the game. First off, you've got bigger issues if your team gives up in a game like that. But second, there have been a lot of studies done showing the lack of existence of momentum in football. It's not a thing. Even if you do believe that it's a thing, even if you do think momentum is real, that's fine. You can disagree with the studies. But if you believe that it's a thing, then why couldn't that team also get positive momentum by converting the first 2-point try? That's the thing that I think people have ignored throughout this whole dispute. The Cowboys going for 2 on their first touchdown doesn't automatically mean that they're going to miss it. They can convert that 2-point conversion. And the other thing too is that if they convert it, they not only just have to kick an extra point to force overtime on their next touchdown, but they could hypothetically win the game in regulation with a 2-point conversion on their next score. And like I said earlier, there's no difference in expected value on a 2-point try versus an extra point. Obviously, that depends on team and personnel, but we're talking at a high level here. Now, Troy Aikman went to Twitter over this topic on Tuesday, and in a tweet, he said, "As @TomMetrics explains, the point was the amount of time left in the game. There was not enough time left in the game to count on 2 more possessions or a failed 2-point play. As it turned out, they never even got 1 more possession." This is all true. I actually don't disagree with this part of Aikman's tweet. Chances are this didn't matter for the Cowboys. I think it still made sense for them to go for 2 after the first touchdown, but sure, it didn't matter much. But then Aikman continues and he says in the same tweet, quote, "Analytics is great, but other factors involved." This really isn't an analytics thing. This is a game theory thing. This is a logic and reasoning exercise. When I was tweeting through this on Saturday, there was a great analogy that popped into my mentions from @jpring07. It said, "It's 12:30 a.m. and you're out of beer. The store closes at 1 a.m. All you have in your pocket is an instant lotto ticket. Do you scratch it off now to see if you have beer money, or do you scratch it off at 12:59? I think we'd all answer the former. You want to scratch it off as soon as you can to see if you have money, because if you don't have money, you've got a half hour to find that money. If you do it at 12:59, you're banking on that scratch off to give you money. But if it doesn't, the store closes. It's too late. You lose the game because you failed on your 2-point conversion." As you guys know, I typically have a mailbag episode each Friday, but for this week, this episode's going to replace that. Keep your questions coming in though, because I'm compiling them throughout the offseason. If you have a mailbag question, you can either hit me up on Twitter @LateRoundQB, or you can email me the question at jj@numberfire.com. And if you've yet to subscribe to the Late Round Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, TuneIn, Stitcher, and Spotify. Thanks, everyone. The next podcast will be ready to consume early next week.